A Tesla left sitting on a street ended up holding a secret no one was ready for. Inside, police discovered the body of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a teenager who had been missing for over a year. The exact cause of her death hasn't been determined, but medical findings and accounts from people close to her show this is more than just a missing persons case. It's a trail of unanswered questions about her home life, her final days, and the silence of those who should have known more. The question now is, who, if anyone, will be held responsible for what happened to Celeste? The first official document released in Celeste Rivas Hernandez's case was her death certificate, and it provides a baseline for understanding what investigators know and don't know about her final moments. According to the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office, both the cause and manner of death have been listed as deferred. This means that while the autopsy itself has been completed, the examiner is not yet able to give a final determination about what killed her or whether her death will be classified as natural, accidental, suicide, or homicide. The deferred label is often used when toxicology results are still pending, and in this case, that testing could be crucial in identifying substances in her system that might explain her collapse and death. One important note on the certificate is the explicit statement that Celeste was not pregnant within the year before her death. This detail immediately eliminates one of the most widespread rumors that had surrounded her disappearance and possible connection with David, the rising musician she was last associated with. For months, online discussions speculated that her disappearance might have been linked to a pregnancy cover-up. The medical examiner's documentation firmly rules that out. The certificate also confirms that Celeste's body was officially released to her family on September 23, 2025. This release usually comes once the medical examiner has finished the full external and internal exam, collected all necessary evidence, and preserved samples for lab testing. At that point, the family is able to make funeral arrangements, even though toxicology results may still be weeks away from completion. Perhaps the most striking detail from the medical findings is the weight recorded at the time of death. Celeste was estimated at around 70 pounds, compared to her known healthy weight of approximately 120 pounds when alive. This extreme drop, combined with the advanced state of decomposition noted in the report, suggests that her death likely occurred weeks before the discovery of her body. Investigators believe her death most likely took place in late July or early August of 2025. The condition of her remains, including significant tissue breakdown, matches a timeline consistent with a body left in a hot vehicle through the peak of summer. In short, the death certificate doesn't yet provide closure on how Celeste died, but it delivers key factual anchors: no pregnancy, a deferred cause and manner of death, a timeline pointing to midsummer, and confirmation that the autopsy is complete while toxicology continues. Each of these details sets the stage for the broader investigation still unfolding. The death certificate's listing of Celeste Rivas Hernandez's cause and manner of death as deferred has major legal consequences. In simple terms, it means there is no confirmed homicide at this stage. Without that classification, prosecutors cannot charge anyone with murder or manslaughter at most. The only clear offense tied directly to her discovery is the concealment of her body. In California, concealing a death without reporting it is a misdemeanor. Under state law, this type of offense carries fines that typically range between $1,000 and $10,000, and it can also lead to probation or a short jail term. While this may sound minimal compared to the seriousness of the case, the law is limited in scope. It punishes the act of hiding or failing to report a body, not the underlying cause of death. If toxicology later reveals evidence of poisoning, overdose, or foul play, that could change the legal landscape. But as of now, the concealment charge is the only clear pathway available. History shows how important the distinction between concealment and homicide can be. A useful comparison is the Tylenol murders of 1982. In that case, several people died after taking capsules laced with cyanide. Even though the deaths were linked to product tampering, the exact perpetrator was never identified, and no homicide conviction was secured. Authorities did pursue other charges, such as obstruction and fraud, but without a clear homicide determination, prosecution of the actual killing stalled. Celeste's case is different in detail but similar in principle. If medical examiners cannot establish her death as a homicide, the law limits the scope of accountability. This is where toxicology becomes central. When decomposition is advanced, it is often difficult to determine cause of death from visible injuries or organ condition. Instead, forensic toxicologists turn to preserved fluids such as vitreous humor from the eye. This fluid is often less contaminated by decomposition and can be tested for substances like fentanyl or other opioids. Some labs even used HCG-based screening methods to detect the presence of fentanyl in degraded samples. If toxicology confirms a lethal substance, Then prosecutors could reopen the question of homicide, since an accidental overdose, intentional self-harm, or deliberate poisoning all carry different legal meanings. As of late September, new updates confirmed that the cause of death is still undetermined and that Celeste's body has been released to her family. This reinforces that the autopsy is complete, but answers depend entirely on pending toxicology. Until those results are known, the case remains in legal limbo. In short, the legal meaning of the deferred classification is that no one can yet be held criminally responsible for Celeste's death itself. Concealment may be charged, but that is a relatively minor offense compared to homicide. Only toxicology has the power to shift this case from concealment to a possible criminal killing. For now, investigators and prosecutors are left waiting on science to provide the missing link. A new perspective has emerged from someone who once dated Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Her ex-boyfriend described her as having a troubled home life and being deeply unhappy long before her disappearance. According to him, Celeste talked about wanting to run away permanently and escape her situation at home. This adds a painful layer to the story, because it suggests that her disappearance may not have been entirely about abduction or foul play, but possibly a continuation of her desire to break free from circumstances she felt she could not control. The ex-boyfriend's account also fuels alternative theories about her death. If Celeste was in an unstable or desperate state of mind, it opens the possibility that her passing could have been connected to an accidental overdose or even suicide, rather than a deliberate act of homicide. Investigators are still waiting for toxicology results, but the potential presence of fentanyl or other substances could support this line of thinking. It would not erase the troubling fact that her body was concealed in a car, but it could change the way responsibility is assigned. From a legal and investigative standpoint, this testimony complicates the case. If Celeste's death was accidental or self-inflicted, the culpability for homicide may weaken significantly. Instead, the focus would shift toward who concealed her body and why. Concealment is still a crime, but it carries far lighter penalties than homicide. The ex-boyfriend's statements don't provide final answers, but they do highlight how Celeste's personal struggles may play a central role in understanding what happened. Her unhappiness and repeated attempts to run away form a context that investigators cannot ignore, as they try to separate fact from fiction in a case that remains clouded by uncertainty. On September 29, 2025, a memorial was held in honor of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered to remember her, lighting candles and sharing stories about her short life. The atmosphere was quiet but heavy, as people tried to make sense of a loss that still carries more questions than answers. For her family, the vigil was both a way to grieve and a way to demand clarity about what really happened to Celeste. The gathering also reflected how deeply this case has touched the larger community. People who never met Celeste showed up simply to show support, holding signs and calling for justice. Many expressed frustration that weeks after the discovery of her body, there is still no official cause of death and no arrests. The uncertainty leaves her loved ones struggling with not only the pain of losing her, but also the weight of unanswered questions. This emotional response connects with a larger national issue. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, thousands of minors run away from home each year, and many of them come from troubled or unstable environments. Cases like Celeste's highlight how vulnerable runaways can be to danger, whether from exploitation, substance use, or neglect. The statistics show that what happened to her is not an isolated tragedy but part of a much broader problem that families and communities face across the country. In the days following the vigil, people continued to talk about whether someone would eventually be arrested in connection with Celeste's death. Speculation remains high, but until toxicology results are in, the case is still in limbo. For now, the vigil stands as a reminder of the pain felt by those closest to her and the demand for answers that has not gone away. One of the most important updates in the case of Celeste Rivas Hernandez is the discovery of surveillance footage recorded on September 8, 2024.
Right there, I'll tell you where that. See that door right there? Number 2, knock on it. Number 2 right there.
Let me talk real quick, okay? You gonna let me talk?
I ain't gonna let you talk.
No, you ain't gonna let me talk. Why you not gonna let me talk? You tripping.
I ain't tripping.
Nah, you tripping. How about you ain't tripping? You gonna let a woman talk?
No,
Alright, I'm not gonna let your woman talk.
Why is she over here? Again.
Your little house, you don't even got a house.
Hey, bro.
You talking?
Yeah, ain't nobody black right here, homie. We're Southsiders right here, homie. We're Southsiders here. Get it right, homegirl. Shut up with your black talking. Shut up. You talking like you black, girl, with your black talking. Yeah. Yeah. Ain't nobody black right here. What are you talking about? I said we're not black over here. Why you keep calling us? You keep saying this. We're not black. Hey, let it go. Go back to your house. Go back to your house. You ain't gonna do nothing, bro. What you gonna do? You ain't no gangster. You ain't nothing. You know what I mean? What you are? What you are but a little girl? What you but a little girl? What you gonna do? What you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
You need to go home. Seriously.
I'm not Mexican. I'm Salvador and you tripping.
Oh my god.
Not because you tripping. Move the out of here.
You ain't gonna do shit. You ain't gonna do shit. You better get over there. Get your ass over there, little girl. Go over there, little girl. You ain't gonna do shit. Go. Go. What are you gonna do, bro?
Go call her dad, babe.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, little girl?
The video, captured by a Nest camera outside her parents' home in Lake Elsinore, shows Celeste involved in a heated argument with neighbors. Reports say the dispute began as a prank, possibly a ding-dong ditch, but quickly escalated. Witnesses said racial slurs, including the N-word, were used during the exchange. Celeste can be heard cussing and shouting back, clearly upset. What makes this footage so significant is its timing. Until now, the common belief was that Celeste had disappeared in April 2024 and had not been seen by her family since then. This video, however, proves she was alive and at home 4 months later, in September 2024. That date is especially striking. It was one day after her 14th birthday, and exactly 1 year before her body would be found inside the Tesla. This detail rewrites the timeline investigators had been working with. The content of the footage also offers clues into her family dynamics. According to reports, after the argument, a neighbor's boyfriend went over to apologize to Celeste's father. Strikingly, her father did not seem particularly upset by the incident. That calm reaction stands out, considering the footage showed his daughter in a loud and tense confrontation. It raises questions about whether her parents fully recognized the depth of Celeste's struggles at that time. This discovery has important implications for the investigation. First, it places Celeste at home months after she was presumed missing, which undermines earlier assumptions that she had simply vanished in April. It also complicates the narrative around whether she was living as a runaway or still returning home occasionally. Investigators now have to factor in the possibility that Celeste's disappearance was not a single event, but a pattern of leaving and coming back, tied to what had been described as a troubled home life. Second, the fact that this footage surfaced so late only after her body was discovered a year later highlights gaps in the search process. If investigators had obtained this footage earlier, it might have shifted the focus of the case toward her family home and immediate neighborhood rather than solely external threats. It shows how critical small pieces of evidence can be when constructing a missing person's timeline. Finally, the emotional weight of the footage cannot be overlooked. Seeing Celeste alive, animated, and visibly upset just a year before her death humanizes her beyond the official reports. It reminds the public and investigators alike that she was a teenager navigating conflict, stress, and possibly fear. That context may prove essential when considering whether her death was the result of homicide, accident, or her own choices. In sum, the Nest camera footage is not just another piece of evidence, it redefines the timeline of Celeste's disappearance, raises new questions about her family's awareness of her struggles, and points to a more complex picture of her final year. The fact that it coincides with both her birthday and the anniversary of her eventual discovery makes it a chilling anchor point in this unfolding mystery. Another piece of the timeline comes from a liquor store surveillance camera dated March 19, 2024. This footage captured Celeste Rivas Hernandez just 1 day after she was reported missing.
The video is very important in terms of capturing a moment, apparently leading up to what we believe is her second disappearance from home. As you said, she is seen walking and then running towards someone or something off screen. The liquor store owner has stated that he believes she entered a vehicle. Now that vehicle...
In the video, she can be seen walking down the street near Lago Spirits in Lake Elsinore, then suddenly running off-screen towards something or someone. The store owner later told investigators that he believed she got into a car waiting nearby. The problem is that the car itself is not clearly visible in the footage, and no license plate was captured. The significance of this clip is twofold. First, it places Celeste at a specific date, time, and location immediately after her disappearance. That alone gives investigators a solid anchor point to track her movements. Second, it raises important questions about who she was meeting that day and why. A retired detective who reviewed the video suggested that, while the content of her text messages from that time is almost certainly gone, investigators could still recover call detail records or text metadata showing who she was communicating with. That information might point directly to the person behind the wheel of the car she was seen running toward. Breaking the video down frame by frame adds more context. At first, Celeste appears calm, walking past the liquor store, as though she is waiting for someone. Moments later, she suddenly speeds up and breaks into a run, disappearing out of the camera's frame. Just before she vanishes, a parked car can be spotted on the edge of the video. Almost immediately after she leaves the frame, that car drives away. This has led both the liquor store owner and investigators to conclude that she likely entered the vehicle, though the make, model, and license plate remain unknown. The private investigator working on the case pointed out that this liquor store footage might not be the only video available. Nearby businesses could have had cameras with wider angles, and street surveillance might have captured the car's departure. In addition, phone records from Celeste around that date could reveal who she had arranged to meet. These sources, when combined, could potentially confirm the identity of the driver and the nature of her disappearance that day. What this footage shows is that Celeste's disappearance was not as simple as leaving home and vanishing without a trace. She was active, moving, and meeting with someone. This makes the March 19 video a critical puzzle piece. It not only documents her second known attempt to leave home, but also establishes that she likely had outside help. For investigators, the liquor store video is a reminder of how a single camera can preserve a crucial moment. For the public, it is a haunting image of a teenager taking decisive steps toward an uncertain fate, steps that would eventually connect to the tragic discovery of her body more than a year later. Celeste Rivas Hernandez's history of running away paints an important backdrop to her disappearance and eventual death. Investigators and family members confirmed that she had left home on more than one occasion, each time creating concern about her safety and who she was with. The first major incident was in January 2024, when Celeste was reported missing and later found in Hollywood. At the time, she was only 13 years old. Police located her and returned her home, but this episode showed early signs of instability. According to law enforcement sources, Celeste's home life was troubled, and this likely contributed to her repeated attempts to run away. There was also an email controversy involving David's manager, Josh Marshall. A private investigator reported that in early 2024, adults in Celeste's life sent Marshall an email claiming that she had run away and was with David. The manager later denied ever receiving such a message, but records indicate that the email was indeed sent. Notably, Celeste returned home the very next day, which some believe was connected to that communication. Whether or not the email directly influenced her return, the timing is difficult to ignore. Her pattern of leaving home did not stop there. By March 2024, surveillance footage showed her near a liquor store in Lake Elsinore, walking and then suddenly running toward a car that was never clearly identified. This was likely her second disappearance. Again, the circumstances suggested that she was not acting entirely on her own, but may have had help from adults who enabled her movements. The most telling update came later from Celeste's ex-boyfriend. He described her as unhappy and struggling with what he called a troubled home life. According to him, Celeste frequently talked about wanting to run away permanently. This perspective adds weight to the idea that her disappearances were not just impulsive teenage acts, but part of a deeper attempt to escape an environment she found unbearable. For investigators, this history is critical. It shows that Celeste was vulnerable and had a pattern of leaving home, which makes it harder to separate voluntary choices from possible exploitation. Each runaway event created openings where she could have been influenced, groomed, or placed in risky situations. The fact that she had reportedly used fake identification and gained access to places beyond the reach of a typical 7th grader suggests she was receiving adult assistance. These earlier incidents also affect how her death is being interpreted. If Celeste was already known to run away, it is easier to see how her disappearance in 2024 could have been dismissed or misunderstood at the time. Her repeated attempts to flee may explain why law enforcement has considered the possibility of an accidental overdose or suicide, rather than strictly homicide. In the end, Celeste's history of running away reflects the reality of a teenager caught between a difficult home life and risky external influences. It complicates the search for accountability, but it also highlights how early intervention might have changed her trajectory. Her story is a reminder of how patterns of running away should never be underestimated, as they can be warnings of deeper struggles and vulnerabilities. When piecing together Celeste Rivas Hernandez's movements from March 2024 to August 2025, a clearer pattern begins to emerge. Each moment of her disappearance, reappearance, and eventual death adds to a timeline that investigators are still struggling to fully understand. The first major point on the timeline comes in January 2024, when Celeste ran away and was found in Hollywood. She was brought back home. But this event marked the beginning of repeated attempts to leave her family environment. By March 19, 2024, she was caught on liquor store footage in Lake Elsinore, running toward a car that was never fully identified. This suggested she had outside help and was not just wandering on her own. From there, the timeline moved into the summer of 2024. Despite being listed as missing, Celeste was confirmed alive in September 2024 through neighborhood camera footage showing her in a heated argument. This was one day after her 14th birthday, placing her back at home months after she was thought to have disappeared for good. It forced investigators to reconsider whether her disappearance in April 2024 had actually been final, or whether she had been moving in and out of her home life in secret. The next significant stretch runs from late 2024 through the first half of 25. During this time, little is firmly documented about Celeste's whereabouts. What is known is that by midsummer 2025, her weight had dropped dramatically and decomposition later confirmed she likely died in late July or early August. This gap, covering almost a year, is the most difficult part of the timeline to reconstruct. Some investigators and private analysts believe this period may have involved grooming or exploitation, possibly explaining how a young teenager could access resources such as transportation, money, or places to stay that she would not have managed on her own. To visualize the timeline, imagine a chart where the axis covers months from January 2024 to September 2025. Key points stand out as peaks: January 2024 first runout in Hollywood. March 19, 2024 liquor store footage running toward an unknown car. September 8, 2024 neighborhood footage alive at home. Late July to early August 2025 estimated time of death based on weight and decomposition. September 8, 2025 body discovered in a Tesla. The gaps between these points highlight the unanswered questions. Each space on the timeline represents weeks or months where Celeste's movements are unclear. These are the windows where influence, grooming, or risky environments may have shaped the outcome. An additional update from police sources confirmed only that she had been dead for weeks before discovery, but no direct cause or suspect was named. That official silence keeps the timeline fragile, built mostly from sightings and scattered evidence. In summary, the timeline from March 2024 to August 2025 shows a cycle of running away, brief returns, and unexplained absences. Instead of one single disappearance, Celeste's story looks more like a series of breaks from home ending in tragedy. Understanding these patterns is essential not only to solving her case, but also to recognizing the vulnerabilities of teenagers who move between unstable homes and uncertain outside influences. The movements of the Tesla where Celeste Rivas Hernandez was eventually found have become one of the most important parts of the case. The car was registered to David and parked only about 150 feet from a Hollywood Hills house he had rented. Neighbors later reported that the vehicle had been sitting in the same spot for close to a month before it was finally towed. The timeline begins on August 27, 2025, when a parking enforcement officer marked the Tesla after it had been sitting for days without moving. Under Los Angeles parking rules, a car cannot remain parked in the same public spot for more than 72 hours without being moved. When the vehicle was still there after the deadline, a citation was issued on September 3, 2025. With the citation unaddressed, the Tesla was officially towed on September 5, 2025. It was taken to an impound lot where it sat until workers noticed a foul odor coming from the trunk area. That discovery led police to check the car, and on September 8, 2025, Celeste was found inside. This timeline means the car sat on a public street for more than a week after being marked, and likely closer to a month in total, without being moved or claimed. The fact that it was parked so close to a house linked to David makes it even more suspicious, suggesting it was abandoned in an area familiar to him. A private investigator who reviewed the initial complaint report also noted that the Tesla had a dent when first logged, but no mention was made of an odor at that point. This detail could mean that decomposition advanced significantly in the days after the car was first marked. The timeline of the Tesla matches with the estimated time of Celeste's death in late July or early August, based on autopsy findings of her weight loss and heavy decomposition. If she died during that window, it is possible her body was placed in the Tesla shortly afterward, and the car was left in the Hollywood Hills location through the end of summer. For investigators, the car timeline is more than just logistics. It provides a framework for when Celeste's body was likely moved, how long it remained undiscovered, and who had access to the area during that period. Each date marking ticketing, towing, and discovery forms a sequence that investigators can compare with travel records, alibis, and movements of people connected to her. The unanswered question is why the Tesla was left untouched for so long. The car was in a residential neighborhood, close to a property linked to David, yet no one came to claim it even after it was marked and cited. That silence turned the vehicle into both a crime scene and a timeline marker, one that may eventually reveal who was responsible for leaving Celeste inside. Investigators have also looked into whether the Tesla itself might hold video evidence. Modern Teslas are equipped with built-in cameras and a dashcam feature that can record activity around the vehicle. According to police sources, requests have already been made to check if this particular car had active recordings saved, since any footage could help establish when and how Celeste's body was placed inside. The car's discovery offers some critical details. When the Tesla was first marked by parking enforcement in late August, the report noted that the vehicle had a dent, but did not mention any foul odor. By the time it was towed on September 5, there was still no formal complaint about a smell. Only 3 days later, on September 8, workers at the impound yard finally reported a strong odor, which led officers to open the trunk and find Celeste. This sequence suggests something important about decomposition and timing. If the body had been in the car for weeks, it is possible that the sealed trunk slowed the release of odor until the car was moved and exposed to different conditions. That could explain why no one reported a smell on August 27 or September 3, but the odor was undeniable on September 8. The presence of cameras in the Tesla raises another possibility. If the dashcam or sentry mode was active, it might have captured the moment when someone placed Celeste's body inside. Even a partial clip showing people near the vehicle could provide valuable leads. Investigators have reportedly pursued this angle, though whether usable footage exists has not been confirmed. If the video is recovered, it could establish the exact date and potentially the identity of whoever left the car near David's rental home. From a broader perspective, this video question highlights how small details can shift the case. A dent noted in an early complaint shows the car was already damaged, but no smell was mentioned until days later. That discrepancy can help narrow down when the body began to decompose enough to be detected, and whether the placement occurred closer to the end of August rather than weeks earlier. In short, the Tesla itself is more than a location, it is evidence. Between the dashcam possibility, the timing of the odor, and the physical state of the car, investigators see it as a silent witness to what happened to Celeste. If footage exists, it could finally answer how and when her body was left inside and by whom. Until then, the dent, the delay in odor, and the car's unexplained abandonment remain key pieces of a puzzle that is still far from solved. The Tesla is not only a physical crime scene but also central to the legal picture. Under California law, leaving a body concealed in a vehicle qualifies as concealment of death, which is a misdemeanor. This charge applies even if investigators cannot prove homicide. The act of hiding or failing to report a death is punishable by fines and probation, and in some cases, short jail terms. While far less severe than murder, it still establishes criminal responsibility for whoever placed Celeste inside the car. The concealment is strengthened by the details of the timeline. The Tesla was parked for weeks, marked, ticketed, and towed, yet no one came forward to report what was inside. This silence, combined with the car's connection to David, suggests deliberate avoidance rather than ignorance. Even without a homicide ruling, prosecutors could argue that someone intentionally abandoned the car with Celeste's body inside, meeting the threshold for concealment. There are parallels in other cases. In the Delphi murders, for example, the suspect's car was abandoned near the scene, and the vehicle part of the circumstantial evidence that tied him to the crime. Although the Delphi case involves a confirmed homicide, the similarity lies in how an abandoned vehicle links a suspect to a victim. Vehicles often serve as both transport and disposal sites, making them powerful tools for prosecutors in showing intent or at least negligence. For Celeste's case, Tesla anchors the legal framework. If homicide cannot be proven, concealment is the minimum charge. If toxicology later shows a substance like fentanyl and prosecutors can argue it was given to her, the car becomes part of a larger homicide case. Until then, it stands as undeniable evidence that her death was hidden, not reported. One of the biggest questions surrounding the case is whether David could have physically been involved in placing Celeste's body in the Tesla. The timing of his tour plays an important role here. Records show he began a preview show in San Francisco around July 26, 2025, with the official tour starting on August 4, 2025. Once the tour was underway, it would have been logistically difficult for him to return to Los Angeles unnoticed. That fact has led some to argue that he has a strong alibi for the period when Celeste likely died and when the car was abandoned. Still, the Tesla was parked close to a property he had rented in the Hollywood Hills. This connection raises the possibility that someone else within his circle could have placed the body there while he was away. The car was first marked on August 27, ticketed on September 3, and towed on September 5, meaning it sat for days in public view without anyone moving it. This leaves open the question of whether the placement happened just before the car was abandoned, or earlier when David was still in the area. Police have publicly confirmed only that Celeste died and her body was placed in the Tesla. but they have not said who might be responsible or whether anyone faces charges beyond concealment. The investigation is officially still pending, with detectives continuing to look at electronic records and other evidence. Speculation remains divided. Some point to David's tour as proof he could not have been directly involved, while others argue the link to his rented home and his car cannot be explained away so easily. Until toxicology and additional evidence are made public, the gap between alibi and suspicion leaves the case unresolved. When the Los Angeles Police Department finally addressed the public about Celeste Rivas Hernandez's case, Captain Scott Williams delivered the most direct confirmation so far. He stated plainly that Celeste had been dead for weeks before her body was discovered in the Tesla. According to him, investigators are certain that someone placed her in the front trunk of the car, but the exact cause of death remains undetermined. Without that determination, he explained, the department cannot hold anyone criminally responsible for her death at this time beyond the act of concealment itself. Captain Williams made it clear that concealment is not a trivial matter. He emphasized that there are criminal consequences for concealment, meaning that even if no homicide charges are ever brought, the person who abandoned Celeste's body in the Tesla can still face prosecution for hiding a death. In California, failing to report or concealing a body is a misdemeanor punishable by fines and probation, and in some cases, short jail sentences. While that may not satisfy the community's demand for justice, it is at least an acknowledgement that a crime has been committed. At the same time, Captain Williams noted that detectives continue to probe the relationship between Celeste and David. The fact that the Tesla was registered to him and parked close to a home he had rented makes him a central figure in the investigation, even if he has not been named as a suspect. Williams avoided making accusations, but confirmed that the department is gathering records, including electronics and communications, to better understand the connection between the two. The emphasis on concealment highlights a frustrating gap in cases where a body is found, but the cause of death is deferred. Without toxicology or direct evidence of foul play, investigators cannot pursue homicide charges, no matter how suspicious the circumstances. Williams's statement reflected this reality, balancing between confirming that a crime had occurred while also admitting that stronger charges are not currently possible. This cautious approach underscores how dependent the case now is on forensic science. Toxicology will have to provide the answers that the autopsy could not. If drugs such as fentanyl are detected at lethal levels, prosecute could revisit the question of homicide or manslaughter. If the results show nothing conclusive, concealment may remain the only charge available. In sum, Captain Williams's statement framed the case as both tragic and incomplete. Celeste died weeks before her discovery, someone took steps to hide her, and that act will carry legal consequences. But whether her death itself will ever result in homicide charges depends entirely on what science can prove and what connections investigators can confirm between Celeste, the Tesla, and the people around her in her final weeks. The investigation into Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death was quickly assigned to the LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division, the unit that typically handles the city's most sensitive and complex cases. Detectives obtained a search warrant on September 17, 2025, targeting a Hollywood Hills property previously rented by David. According to law enforcement sources, officers recovered several items during that search, including computers and other electronic devices. These materials are now being examined to see whether they contain communications, location data, or any digital evidence that could connect directly to Celeste's final weeks. Investigators also looked for physical traces such as blood or hair during the search, though so far no publicly confirmed results have been released. The search was intended to either strengthen or weaken the link between Celeste's death and the property connected to David, who had moved out just before the summer. At this stage, the lab analysis and toxicology results remain pending. Until those findings come back, detectives have limited options in pushing forward with homicide-related charges. The Robbery Homicide Division continues to lead the case, treating the Tesla, the electronics, and any forensic evidence as critical to uncovering what happened in the days before Celeste died. From the beginning, David's name has been tied to Celeste's case because the Tesla where her body was found was registered in his name and parked close to a house he had rented. Despite this connection, police have not named him a suspect. Captain Williams and other officials have repeated that the investigation is still ongoing, but that no homicide charges are currently in play. The only confirmed crime so far is the concealment of Celeste's body. What complicates matters is the question of David's cooperation. Early on, his representatives said he was fully cooperating with investigators. That statement gave the impression that he was open and responsive to police requests. But when asked directly weeks later, officials would not confirm whether David was actively working with them. This gap between initial assurances and later silence has fueled speculation about how engaged he really is in the process. David's public silence has also added to the uncertainty. While he has canceled shows and delayed professional commitments, he has not personally addressed the situation. Investigators, meanwhile, continue to treat his connection as circumstantial but significant. The fact that Celeste was found in his car, abandoned near his rental, ensures he remains under scrutiny, even if not formally accused. The current position is straightforward but unsatisfying for many. David is not officially a suspect, but his cooperation is no longer publicly confirmed. The LAPD has stated only that the investigation is ongoing and that detectives are still gathering evidence. Until toxicology reports and digital forensics provide new clarity, David's role in the timeline remains open to interpretation, leaving more questions than answers about what he knew and when. By the end of September and into the first days of October 2025, the investigation into Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death was still officially described as a homicide probe, even though no cause of death had been determined. Detectives confirmed they were continuing to treat the case as open and active, reviewing forensic results, electronic evidence, and the timeline of events that placed Celeste in the Tesla. The focus remained on whether toxicology would reveal anything conclusive about how she died, and whether that would shift the legal picture from concealment alone to possible homicide charges. These updates came just one day after the community held a memorial for Celeste on September 29. The vigil brought together family, neighbors, and supporters who wanted to show solidarity and demand answers. The emotional weight of that gathering carried into the following days, with people continuing to express frustration that no arrests had been made and no one had been named responsible for her death. The contrast between a grieving community and the slow pace of the investigation underscored how difficult it is to move forward without final forensic results. Investigators also acknowledged that they were reviewing video footage from multiple sources as part of their timeline analysis. While officials would not release details, they confirmed that material gathered in late September could become part of the broader probe. These steps suggest that even without toxicology, police are working to piece together evidence that might reveal when and how Celeste's body was placed in the car. In short, the close of September and beginning of October left the case in a holding pattern. A homicide probe remains active, a family continues to mourn, and the larger community waits for answers that have yet to come. One of the first ripple effects of the investigation into Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death was the sudden collapse of David's professional schedule. His tour had been set to launch in late September, with a performance in San Francisco on September 19, 2025, followed by a show in Los Angeles on September 20. A European leg was also scheduled to begin shortly after. Instead, all of those dates were abruptly canceled. The cancellations came at a critical time for David's career. He had been preparing to promote his next album, with shows designed not only to showcase new music, but also to expand his international reach. Pulling the plug on both the US and European dates was more than a scheduling decision, it was a recognition that the unfolding investigation made it impossible for him to carry on with business as usual. His label, Interscope, reportedly paused its promotional activities around the same time, leaving his upcoming projects in limbo. Public statements about the cancellations were limited, but sources close to the situation confirmed that the decision was directly connected to the ongoing probe. The reasoning was straightforward, with investigators examining the Tesla, executing search warrants, and asking questions about David's connection to Celeste. Continuing to perform would have risked greater controversy. For fans and observers, the cancellations marked a turning point. Up to that moment, David's career had appeared insulated from the tragedy, but by halting the tour, the investigation's weight became undeniable. What had started as a personal and legal crisis now had visible professional consequences. The canceled shows, combined with the pause in album promotion, made clear that David's future in music would remain uncertain until the case reached some form of resolution.
Release says Withered Deluxe, Morescence out September 19th. Now, he was also on tour when a lot of this was going on, and I want to talk about that too. So apparently
David's last visible activity online came on September 7, 2025, just days before Celeste's body was discovered. On that date, he posted about his upcoming album release, a project called Withered Deluxe Morescence, scheduled for September 19. After that post, his accounts went silent. For someone who had been regularly active in promoting music and interacting with fans, the sudden stop stood out immediately once the investigation began. What makes this period even more striking is that while his public posting ended, his following actually grew. On September 13, reports noted that he gained more than 22,000 followers on Spotify and over 25,000 new Instagram followers in just a short span of time. The increase suggested that public attention on the case, and the fact his name was directly tied to the discovery of Celeste's body, was driving a surge of interest. This created a strange contrast. On the one hand, David was silent, avoiding any comment about Celeste or the case. On the other, his online presence was expanding rapidly, fueled not by his music releases but by the controversy surrounding him. The silence since September 7 continues to stand as part of the mystery, raising questions about his legal strategy and how closely he is being advised to avoid public statements. The fallout from Celeste's case has not only touched David's music career, but also his commercial partnerships. Shortly after her body was discovered in his Tesla, two major brands Crocs and Hollister quietly pulled promotional images of him from their campaigns. These partnerships had been a key part of his image, connecting him with young fans and reinforcing his rise in mainstream culture. Their withdrawal marked a clear signal that corporate sponsors were unwilling to remain linked to his name while the investigation continued. This kind of response is common when public figures become associated with legal controversy. Even without charges, companies tend to distance themselves from uncertainty, especially when a case involves minors or tragic circumstances. For David, losing these endorsements added to the impression that his career was on pause in more ways than one. Music releases stopped, tours were canceled, and now branding deals were being cut. There was also a major shift in his personal logistics. On September 24, 2025, moving trucks were seen outside the Hollywood Hills mansion he had been renting, and large boxes were carried out. This move came about a week after the property was searched under a warrant for electronics and possible forensic evidence. Although no official reason was given, the timing suggested that David or his team decided to end the lease in light of the investigation. Together, these developments paint a picture of a young artist whose professional life has unraveled quickly. Brand partnerships have evaporated, and his ties to a high-profile property were cut almost immediately after police scrutiny. Whether temporary or permanent, these changes show how the ripple effects of the case have extended far beyond music, reshaping the financial and public image David once maintained. When speculation about Celeste's death began drawing in names connected to David, his manager Josh Marshall became the focus of rumors. Reports suggested that a red Tesla tied to David's management had been seen leaving a Hollywood Hills property where David had stayed. Some even claimed the car belonged to Marshall himself. In response, Marshall took to TikTok to issue a denial. He wrote that he had zero knowledge of anything related to Celeste's death, adding that he did not live in California and worked remotely 95% of the time. He stressed that his role was limited and that others handled David's day-to-day management. Marshall specifically addressed the red car, saying it was not his. The registration may have linked back to David's management company, but Marshall insisted he was not involved. This clarification was later confirmed to have come directly from him, not an impersonator. LA Magazine reported that it had verified that it belonged to him and that he stood by his denial. Alongside his denial about the car, Marshall also pushed back against a separate rumor tied to an old email. A private investigator claimed that in 2024, adults connected to Sud had sent an email warning him she was with David after one of her runaway incidents. The day after the alleged email, Celeste returned home. Marshall, however, flatly denied ever receiving such a message, repeating that he had no knowledge of it. In a longer statement, Marshall emphasized his personal situation, saying he was a father of 3, lived full-time with his family outside of California, and was not anyone's roommate. He described the case as tragic and said it was affecting many lives, including his own family. For him, the accusations were baseless and harmful, and he insisted on distancing himself from them. In short, Josh Marshall's denials covered 3 main points. He never received the email allegedly linking him to Celeste's runaway episode. The red Tesla was not his car, and he was not based in California during the events. His statements painted a picture of a manager trying to protect his reputation while insisting his role in David's career was mostly remote and limited. One of the most debated issues involving Josh Marshall, David's manager, is the so-called mystery email. According to a private investigator, in 2024 adults close to Celeste sent Marshall an email during one of runaway episodes. The timing was suspicious. The very next day Celeste returned home, leading some to believe the email may have reached David and Celeste, prompting her sudden reappearance. The investigator stated firmly that the email existed, claiming he had seen it, and that it had since been provided to law enforcement. From his perspective, the chain of events was clear. Adults tried to alert Marshall, an email was sent, and Celeste's abrupt return the following day seemed too coincidental to ignore. Marshall, however, has consistently denied ever receiving such a message. He publicly stated that he had never received any email related to Celeste and had no knowledge of what others were alleging. He described the claims as baseless and emphasized that much of what was being said about him was rumor taken out of context. In one longer statement, Marshall even underscored his role as a father, noting that he lived full-time with his wife and children and worked remotely 95% of the time, distancing himself from both the car speculation and the email allegations. This set up a classic, she said, scenario. On one side, the investigator swore the email had been sent and was now in official hands. On the other, Marshall stood firm that nothing of the sort had ever reached him. Without direct proof of delivery or acknowledgement, the truth remains murky. What this controversy highlights is how quickly narratives can diverge in a high-profile case. Even small details like whether an email was sent or received can take on outsized meaning, feeding speculation about who knew what and when. For Marshall, denying the email was part of protecting his credibility. For the investigator, standing by its existence reinforced the possibility of missed opportunities to intervene earlier in Celeste's troubled life. At present, the email remains an unresolved thread. Until more is revealed by investigators, it stands as one of the most puzzling disputes in the case, leaving the public to weigh two conflicting accounts without clear resolution. Josh Marshall's TikTok comments drew a wave of attention, and soon after, he was contacted directly by a journalist who wanted to confirm whether the account truly belonged to him. In an interview later reported by Ella magazine, Marshall verified that the comments were his and stood firmly by them. He repeated that he had no involvement with Celeste's disappearance or death, did not live in California, and worked almost entirely remotely. The journalist explained that before publishing, she reached out privately to make sure the messages were genuine. Marshall replied directly, confirming his identity and reaffirming his denials. He did not expand much beyond his earlier statements, but he made clear that he had zero knowledge of the circumstances surrounding Celeste and insisted his role in David's career was limited. His decision to first respond in the comment section of a video, rather than through a formal statement, surprised many observers. But it showed his urgency in trying to push back against the rumors. In longer follow-up remarks, Marshall also spoke about the toll the case was taking on his own family. He revealed that he was a father of 3 and said the constant speculation was deeply unsettling for his wife and children. He described the case as tragic and expressed sympathy for Celeste's family, while at the same time asking that unverified claims not be spread about him. For Marshall, confirming his TikTok statements with a magazine outlet was a way of drawing a line. He wanted to make it clear that he was not hiding, but also that his involvement was far less than what rumors suggested. In the process, he highlighted not only his own defense, but also the broader human impact of the investigation on families connected to the case. The role of Josh Marshall, as David's manager, has naturally raised questions in the broader discussion about responsibility and oversight. Managers in the entertainment industry often handle more than just booking shows or negotiating contracts. They sometimes serve as gatekeepers, controlling access and providing structure for young artists. In cases where underage fans become closely tied to performers, critics argue that management has a duty to step in if boundaries blur. The controversy around Marshall touches on this very issue. While he insists that his involvement with David was remote and minimal, others point out that managers frequently know much more about their clients' personal lives than they admit. If Celeste was spending time around David during her runaways, some observers wonder whether Marshall or others in the team looked the other way or even facilitated a level of access that should have been questioned. Comparisons have been drawn to other scandals, including the Jeffrey Epstein case, where powerful figures shielded inappropriate relationships under the guise of mentorship, management, or social networking. Although there's no direct evidence tying Marshall to wrongdoing, the very fact that his name has surfaced in this way shows how management structures can be scrutinized in cases involving minors. The lesson from history is clear. When adults are in positions of influence, failing to act can sometimes be as damaging as direct involvement. The unresolved cause of Celeste's death only deepens the debate. With medical examiners listing the manner as undetermined and toxicology results still pending, the legal case remains fragile. But speculation around grooming and negligence persists, because people are searching for explanations that go beyond the immediate question of how Celeste died. They want to know who should have stepped in, who might have ignored warning signs, and whether someone in a position of authority could have prevented the outcome. Ultimately, Marshall's denials may be true and his role may genuinely have been limited. Still, the case underscores how the ecosystem around young stars, managers, agents, promoters can create spaces where vulnerable individuals slip through the cracks. It is less about proving one manager guilty and more about asking whether the system itself failed Celeste by not ensuring stricter boundaries and oversight. Legal analyst Matt Irvine pointed out that one of the strongest elements in David's favor is his tour schedule. Records show that by late July and early August 2025, when Celeste is believed to have died, David was already preparing for shows in San Francisco and later moving into a full U.S. tour in early August. Irvine explained that once the tour was in motion, it would have been extremely difficult for him to slip back to Los Angeles unnoticed. Flights, hotels, staff, and stage crews all keep logs, and those records serve as a type of alibi. Still, Irvine noted that an alibi tied to a tour is not absolute. Technology and travel options can create windows of opportunity, especially if someone were determined to return briefly. That is where surveillance footage becomes crucial. Investigators are now looking at video sources, ranging from street cameras to the Tesla's own built-in systems to determine whether anyone can be seen approaching the car or leaving the body. For Irvine, the real key will be whether law enforcement can match the exact timing of the Tesla's abandonment with David's documented whereabouts. If they cannot, the door remains open for speculation, no matter how strong the alibi appears. Retired prosecutor William Corman stressed a different point: silence. He explained that in cases like this, defense attorneys often advise their clients to say as little as possible, even if they are innocent. Every public statement becomes part of the record, and contradictions, even minor ones, can be used later. Corman observed that David has largely gone silent since the discovery of Celeste's body, which is exactly what he would expect from a client under investigation. Corman also commented on the fact that David did not resist when his car and property were searched. Allowing law enforcement to proceed without obstruction can make an impression on both investigators and the public. It suggests a willingness to cooperate while still protecting one's legal rights. Corman made it clear that cooperation does not always mean direct communication, sometimes it simply means not interfering. In his view, the investigation is still in a holding pattern until toxicology provides results. Without those answers, prosecutors cannot move forward on homicide. The silence from David may frustrate the public, but from a legal perspective, Corman argued it is the smartest strategy. Private investigator Steve Fisher brought attention to another angle: the possibility of trafficking and the role of toxicology. He argued that Celeste's pattern of running away, coupled with her troubled home life, made her especially vulnerable. Fisher raised the concern that she may have been groomed or manipulated during the months before her death. He pointed out that teenagers in similar situations often fall victim to exploitation, and gaps in Celeste's timeline leave room for such a possibility. Fisher also emphasized the importance of toxicology testing. With Celeste's body showing signs of severe decomposition, traditional autopsy methods could not clearly establish a cause of death. Toxicology, particularly tests for opioids like fentanyl, may provide the only definitive evidence. Fisher explained that fentanyl can sometimes be detected in fluids preserved longer than blood, such as vitreous humor. If fentanyl or another controlled substance is found at lethal levels, it would not only establish the cause of death, but also raise questions about how Celeste obtained the drugs and whether they were given to her deliberately. For Fisher, the toxicology results are the pivot point. If positive for fentanyl, the case could shift from concealment toward homicide or trafficking. If negative, the investigation risks stalling at concealment alone. As September turned into October, more updates began to surface about the evidence connected to the Tesla. Police sources confirmed that they had been reviewing potential video from the car's dashcam system. Teslas are designed to record through multiple cameras, and if the system was active, it could have captured valuable footage of when the body was placed inside. Even partial video showing movement near the car could help investigators pinpoint timing and possibly identify who was involved. The potential existence of video evidence has become a major focus. Investigators are aware that a working dashcam could provide clarity in a way that other forms of evidence cannot. Unlike speculation or circumstantial connections, video is direct and undeniable. Whether such footage actually exists is still unknown, but officers have confirmed that the car's systems are being analyzed carefully. Meanwhile, private investigators involved in the case have continued to stress that the combination of digital evidence, toxicology, and the Tesla's timeline will eventually create a clearer picture. For now, the official position remains cautious. Celeste's cause of death is undetermined, the homicide probe is still open, and concealment is the only confirmed crime. Until more evidence is released, the case continues to hang in balance, with the Tesla's possible video files seen as one of the most promising leads. From the beginning, Celeste's case has been as much about speculation and public reaction as it has been about hard evidence. When her body was found in David's Tesla, questions about their relationship immediately came to the surface. Friends later recalled that Celeste often spoke of being connected to someone she believed was 19 years old. That age gap may not sound extreme, but when combined with the fact that she was still a minor, it carried serious implications. The suggestion of a shared tattoo with the letters H deepened that suspicion, especially since it was later used to help confirm her identity. Appearances on live streams, whether casual or joking, fueled the perception that she was closely tied to David in ways many felt uncomfortable about. Her ex-boyfriend confirmed that she had a troubled home life and spoke often about running away forever, which added context. Celeste may have been seeking escape, but the people she leaned on may not have been safe options. Out of this emerged a storm of theories. Some argued that the Tesla was a setup, that it had been abandoned near David's rental home to make him look guilty. They noted that the car sat there for weeks without being moved, even after being ticketed. Others went further, spinning stories that her death was staged in ritualistic fashion, pointing to lyrics in David's songs or symbolic overlaps. While none of this has been verified, it showed how quickly people turned to their own interpretations when official answers lagged behind. In the absence of a declared cause of death, rumor filled the silence. At the same time, the emotional response of the community was raw and visible. On September 29, a vigil brought family, friends, and strangers together to honor Celeste's life. People lit candles, shared memories, and called for justice. In the days after, conversations widened beyond her case alone. Advocates reminded others that thousands of children run away each year, and many face risks like those Celeste encountered: exploitation, drugs, or being pulled into unsafe relationships. Her story became a similarly easily vulnerable teens slip through the cracks. By the end of September, the investigation stood at a crossroads. The facts were straightforward. Celeste had been dead for weeks before her body was discovered on September 8. The autopsy concluded with no clear cause, leaving both cause and manner of death as undetermined. Toxicology was still pending, and until those results came in, homicide charges were off the table. The only confirmed crime was concealment of a body, a misdemeanor in California that carries fines and probation but not the weight of a murder conviction. Police searched a Hollywood Hills property tied to David, seizing electronics, but stopped short of naming him a suspect. His manager, Josh Marshall, denied any involvement, pushing back against both the speculation about a red car and the claim of an old email linking him to Celeste's earlier runaways. For now, the picture remained blurry: a grieving family, a body concealed in a car, and an investigation waiting on science. Legal experts weighed in with predictions. They explained that if toxicology shows fentanyl or another lethal substance, prosecutors could build a case for homicide or manslaughter. If the results are inconclusive, the most the law can punish is the concealment itself. This leaves the public in limbo. Some insist David's car and connections are too suspicious to ignore, while others argue his tour schedule gave him an alibi. Until the lab reports are final, speculation about an arrest is only guesswork. Beyond the legal process, Celeste's story carries social lessons. She had a history of running away, and each time she was returned home without deeper intervention. That cycle is not unique. Statistics from national child protection groups show how many minors run away each year and how often their underlying problems go unaddressed. Once on the streets, they are far more likely to face exploitation or fall into dangerous situations. Celeste's repeated attempts to flee should have been seen as cries for help, but the system treated them as temporary incidents rather than warning signs of something bigger. The case also highlights risks within the entertainment world. Young stars often attract teenage fans, and boundaries can blur without strong adult oversight. Whether grooming occurred in Celeste's case is still unproven, but her proximity to an older artist, combined with her age and troubled home life, underscores the need for stricter safeguards. Managers, agents, and industry figures are supposed to protect not only the careers of their clients but also the safety of those around them. When oversight fails, the consequences can be devastating. Celeste's case also shows how fragile forensic evidence can be. By the time her body was discovered, decomposition had erased many of the answers a clean autopsy might have provided. Science may yet reveal the truth through toxicology, but the fact that so much now hangs on one test is a reminder of how timing can shape justice. Without cause of death, accountability is limited, and closure for families remains elusive. In the end, what stands out most is the human cost. A teenager with dreams of escape, a family left with grief, a community demanding answers, and an artist whose career has been stalled under suspicion. Celeste's story is not just about one case but about how society handles vulnerable children, how industries guard or fail to guard the young, and how justice is pursued when evidence is uncertain. For those following the case, the call is simple: do not let her name fade. The search for justice should not stop at concealment charges or unresolved toxicology. It should extend to asking harder questions about prevention, protection, and accountability. Every runaway is at risk, every ignored warning sign is a missed chance to intervene, and every silence from those in power is a step away from justice. Celeste's story, painful as it is, can become a turning point if it forces people to act differently the next time a child shows signs of being in danger. Justice for Celeste is more than a demand for answers, it is a demand for change. In the end, Celeste deserves justice. She just was a kid who still laughed at small things, still tried to fit into a world that never made room for her. Celeste Rivas Hernandez didn't get the chance to grow up, to outlive her mistakes, or to find safety in a place that saw her. Her story ends inside a Tesla, left alone, voiceless, and cold. But her name, Celeste, still moves through every corner of this case. It's whispered in the protests written on candles, and carried by people who never even met her, but can't forget the image of a child abandoned by everyone who should have cared. The hardest truth that Celeste kept reaching out long before she died. Every runaway, every argument, every post, those were calls for help. And no one answered in time. The system labeled her a runaway, not a victim. The adults around her stayed quiet, distracted to act. Now they speak of her in past tense, while the rest of us try to make sense of how a girl this young could disappear, die, and be hidden without anyone noticing for weeks. Justice for Celeste isn't just about an arrest or a verdict. It's about exposing the chain of silence that allowed her to vanish in plain sight. It's about the adults who failed to protect her, the institutions that wrote her off, and the industry that blurred the lines between fame and danger. Every unanswered question about her death, who left her there, who looked away, demands a response. Not from rumor, not from speculation, but from truth backed by accountability. Celeste deserves more than pity. She deserves a world where girls like her aren't treated as disposable. A world where missing means someone actually goes looking. Where a child's cry for help doesn't vanish into bureaucracy. Justice for Celeste means demanding that the investigation continue until every piece of evidence is seen, every person questioned, every lie exposed. Let her name stay loud. Let it break the silence that killed her. Because if this story ends with just another file closed and another candle burned out, then we've all failed her again. Justice for Celeste isn't over. It starts now, with us, with every voice that refuses to forget.